evacuation procedure. We're not expecting the fire alarms to go off, so if they do, we'll treat them as real. So we can evacuate the building by the doors that you entered in, and down the steps, and meet across the road by the bank by the Lloyds Bank across the road. I believe the public gallery, there's also a fire exit up there. If anybody does need any assistance in getting out of the building, give us a shout. We'll make sure that will be provided. And it's also a good time to remind people to turn their phones off or to put them on silent. Thank you. Are you done? Item number 2 is to receive apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Dillon and Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Wilson is being substituted by Councillor Bird. Okay, Helen, yeah. Yeah, okay. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of February. Are you happy that I sign those? True and correct record? Okay, thank you. Item number 4 is to receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary and other interests in accordance with the members' code of conduct. If you do realise something during the meeting, then please tell us. But most interests now are recorded within the council. So no more. Okay, thank you. Item number 5, declarations of contact, where members have had any contact on any of the agenda items tonight. No? Thank you. Which then takes us on to the applications for planning permission, where the public have indicated a desire to speak. Under the Constitution, you'll be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. Once the egg timer goes off, I will stop you at that 3 minutes. However, there may be, councillors have the opportunity then, members of the committee, to ask for any points of clarification. They can only be to clarify something that you've said during that time. Okay, so I think that covers that. So our first item is Alwee Circle, Ash Green. Can I just before I start, can I just check that the speakers listed are here? I know Councillor Jenkins, Councillor Brown are here. Is Janet Watson, Rosemary Hamilton here? Okay, and Ellie Jones. Okay, thank you. And Dio Flanagan isn't. No, okay then. In that case, you'll just be allowed the 3 minutes, the same as anybody else. Okay. We did have County Councillor Chris Morris, who is here, who was a reserve speaker, but as all the objectors and councillors are here, I'm afraid I can't bring you in, Councillor Morris. Right. Okay. As I say, first item is Alwee Circle, Ash Green, and Phil, if you can start that, please.
Thanks, Chair. This is item 1 at site 113D002. Alwee Circle for outline permission for up to 22 residential dwellings with all matters reserved except for access. That means that layout, appearance, scale and landscaping will be considered under the relevant reserved matters applications. And for the information, there have been 15 objections, as well as 4 letters of support. Oh, there's item 1. The assessment issues for this application are as follows: the principal development, the impact on the greenbelt, impact on residential and visual amenity, the impact on highway safety, flooding and drainage, ecology, biodiversity and open space, waste and refuse issues, archaeology, affordable housing, air quality, land contamination and stability, the requested planning obligations, and then finally a conclusion and then a recommendation. Starting with the principle of development. The site lies within the Greenbelt, where development is generally considered inappropriate. National policy through the NPPF sets out the need for sustainable development, and it also establishes a presumption in favour of sustainable development, meaning that proposals should be approved if they are in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations or adverse impacts indicate otherwise. Strategic and Policy DS1 of the Borough Plan Review reinforces this presumption as a golden thread running through both plan making and decision taking. Policy DS3 sets out the overall housing requirement, and although this site has not been allocated in those figures, the proposal would be considered a windfall development. Policy DS6 protects the Greenbelt by restricting development only that which is considered not inappropriate under national policy. The site does fall within a defined Greenbelt, where residential development would generally be inappropriate and harmful unless justified under national policy. This will be assessed and explained in more detail in the Greenbelt assessment, and that is both in the agenda report and will come in this presentation. Finally, the site is outside the defined settlement boundary, and DS2, the policy DS2 limits development outside settlement boundaries to the uses that are necessary in the countryside, such as agricultural, forestry, or leisure, which this scheme is not. However, policy H2 of the Borough Plan Review does have an exception section of the policy, which will be explained now. Quoting straight from the policy, outside of settlement boundaries, housing development will be supported on small rural exception sites, subject to the site meeting all criteria set out in the policy. The exceptions, that is the policy screenshot straight from the Borough Plan Review. The site lies adjacent to the defined settlement boundary, directly adjoining Ash Green and the northern Coventry fringe. In terms of scale and form, the proposed development is considered appropriate within the surrounding context. The scheme comprises 100% affordable housing located in a highly sustainable location with strong vehicular and non-vehicular transport connections. The delivery of affordable housing will be secured through a legal agreement or condition as shown in the recommendation, which ensures that the proposed dwellings remain affordable in perpetuity. Finally, as the majority of the homes are affordable and the proposal is for 100% affordable dwellings, this clearly satisfies the fourth criteria of policy H2, and therefore, on this basis, the development is considered to fully comply with the exceptions in policy H2, and therefore is acceptable in principle as a residential development within the Greenbelt. The impact on the Greenbelt assessment is split into sections in the report, and this presentation it will follow a similar format. The first assessment point is to decide and determine whether the site is located within the grey belt or not. The glossary of the NPPF is clear on its definition of the grey belt, and that is in full in the section of the report. I'm not going to read the whole definition for now, but it is in full in the report. Firstly, in relation to whether land can be considered previously developed land, the definition makes clear that where land is occupied by a structure, it should not automatically be assumed that the whole curtilage is suitable for development. While there were stables located in the north of the site, the land itself remains largely undeveloped, and the site does not contain large areas of hard standing or fixed infrastructure, and therefore it does not comprise land that has been previously developed. The current use of the site is a question. This is not considered to be an agricultural or forestry use as mentioned in the exclusions in the definition. And the site is not connected to mineral extraction, landfill, or any other activity identified in the definition. It's not located within a significantly built up area, and it has not previously been restored through development management procedures or developed in a way where development have blended back into the landscape. This does not in itself make it not a grey belt, and the next part of the assessment considers whether the site strongly contributes to 3 of the 5 purposes of the green belt. Starting with purpose A, which is designed to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. The guidance makes clear that this purpose relates specifically to large built-up urban areas and villages, and any development smaller than a town are not considered to fall within that category. In this case, the largest built-up areas are Coventry to the south, Bedworth to the north, and Birmingham some distance to the west. It is again important to note that the nearby settlements of Kersley, Ash Green and Neils Green are villages or smaller, rather than large built-up areas, and therefore the site will not contribute to the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, and so it is acceptable. Turn to purpose B, which is to prevent neighbouring towns from merging into one another. Again, the guidance explains that this purpose is concerned with maintaining separations between towns and not villages. The land does not strongly contribute to this purpose, and it would not form a substantial part of the gap between towns where the development could result in a loss of visual separation. This is because in this instance, the site lies between Kersley and Ash Green. These are not towns, and as a result, development on the site would not result in the merging of towns, nor would it materially reduce the gap between the nearby towns of Nuneaton, Bedworth and the city of Coventry. Finally, with regard to purpose D, which relates to preserving the setting and special character of historic towns, the land that strongly contributes to this purpose would normally form part of the setting of a historic town and make an important visual contribution to its character. The site does not form part of the setting of any historic town and has no direct visual or historic relationship with one. On that basis, the site is considered to make only a weak contribution to this purpose. Members should also note that the Grey Belt's land excludes sites where other protected assets identified in the footnote of the NPPF would provide a strong reason for refusing development. These include designated habitat sites, sites of strong scientific interest, local green space, national landscapes, national parks, irreplaceable habitats, designated heritage assets, and areas at risk of flooding or coastal change. None of these constraints apply in this case, and the relevant statutory consultees have not raised objections to this proposal. For these reasons, the site is not considered to strongly contribute to the relevant purposes of the Green Belt, and is not objected to any of the points in footnote 7, and therefore it can be considered a Grey Belt. After concluding that the site is Grey Belt land, the next consideration is to assess whether the development which utilises Grey Belt land is inappropriate development or not. There is no conclusion in the NPPF which states that development on Grey Belt land is automatically not inappropriate, and therefore a full assessment has taken place. Paragraph 154 of the NPPF sets out the types of development that are not considered inappropriate in the Green Belt, and the proposal does not fall within any of these listed exceptions. And while the scheme proposes affordable housing, the exemption within paragraph 154 only applies where this is supported by specific development plan and policies, which are not present within the Borough Plan Review. As a result, the proposal must be assessed against paragraph 155 of the NPPF, which states that housing on Grey Belt land should not be regarded as inappropriate development where 4 conditions are met. I will now move to the next slide to summarise these tests. Firstly, the development must not fundamentally undermine the purposes of the remaining Green Belt across the wider plan area. The site lies within parcel NG5 of the Coventry and Warwickshire Green Belt, and while the parcel has some local role in preventing urban development of this site would not fundamentally undermine the wider Green Belt's role, which includes the prevention of town merging or preserving settlement of historic towns, as mentioned in the previous slide. Secondly, there must be a demonstrable unmet need for the type of development proposed. The scheme delivers 100% affordable housing, and both the Council's planning policy and housing teams confirm there is a significant unmet need for affordable housing within the borough. Thirdly, the site must be in a sustainable location. Although outside the defined settlement boundary, the site sits on the edge of Ash Green. A bus stop is very close and provides regular services to Nuneaton, Bedworth and Coventry, and local facilities within Ash Green are around 500 metres from the site. The site is therefore considered sustainable. Finally, the proposal must meet the golden rules set out in NPPF paragraphs 156 and 157. Development exceeds the affordable housing requirement in the golden rules by delivering 100% affordable homes, and will provide infrastructure contributions through the legal agreement, and will contribute to improvements to public green and open space. Taking all these points together, all 4 conditions in paragraph 155 are satisfied, and therefore, as the development is Grey Belt and meets all the paragraphs, it should therefore be regarded as not inappropriate development within the Green Belt. In conclusion to the previous 2 slides, it is considered after assessment that as it's located in the Green Belt, there is no limited definitional harm to the Green Belt. Sorry, they're getting my colours mixed up. In the Grey Belt, and due to limited definition harm to the Green Belt, which weighs heavily in its favour in the planning balance. The next assessment issue is the impact on residential amenity. The development site is adjacent on one side to existing residential properties within our circle. The Sustainable and Design Construction SPD sets out minimum separation distances that should be maintained between existing and proposed dwellings and between the new dwellings themselves. This is to protect light, privacy, and the overall residential amenity. The exact layout, scale, and details of the proposed dwellings will be determined and assessed at the reserved matters stage, at which point the SPD guidance in both national and local policies will be fully applied. Based on the current indicative layout, the minimum separation distances set out in the SPD are achievable between the proposed dwellings and to all existing properties. On this basis, it is considered that the impact on residential amenity could be acceptable. Next is the impact on visual amenity. The proposal will permanently alter the character of the site through the introduction of residential development. While the site is adjacent to existing residential uses, these are primarily a caravan-style development, with the nearest built form also including a nursing home to the south and development along a new road within the settlement boundary. As such, the introduction of two-story dwellings would represent a new built form, but scale, design, and appearance will be considered at the relevant reserved matters stage. The next issue is the impact on highway safety, and on screen is the is the proposed access plan for the site. Policy HS2 requires that the transport implications of development are addressed, including safe and suitable access to the site. The proposed access would be taken from New Road at the southern boundary of the site, with a 5.5 metre wide carriageway and a 2 metre footways on either side. Warwickshire County Council Highways have been consulted throughout the application, and whilst over the application they raised a number of concerns, these have now been overcome with the conditions and the approved RSA. Some additional issues were identified through the RSA, including the matters relating to vegetation, forward visibility, and potential parking within visitor displays. But these, through further revision and clarification, these matters were addressed through design changes and mitigation measures, including improved curved heights, vegetation clearance, and introduction of advanced warning road markings. Highways officers now confirmed that the remaining matters can be appropriately managed through planning conditions. These include the constructions of the Bournemouth access, footway improvements and the crossings, implementation of the advanced warning scheme as mentioned, provision of displays, and a construction management plan. These conditions are on the decision notice and have been refined to ensure they meet the tests set out in the NPPF, and therefore the proposal is considered acceptable in highway safety terms. Next, I would like to address the matter of flooding and drainage for the site. The NPPF requires that new development considers potential flood risk and ensures that risk is not increased elsewhere, and it sets out a sequential risk-based approach to steer development away from areas of high risk. The site is located within Flood Zone 1 and has a very low risk of surface water flooding. On this basis, the proposal is considered compliant with Policy NE4 and follows a sequential approach. Paragraph 182 of the NPPF also requires that major developments incorporate sustainable drainage systems unless there is clear evidence that this is inappropriate. The lead flood authority, Warwickshire County Council Flood Risk Management, were consulted, and initially they raised an objection due to insufficient information in the submitted assessment and strategy. Their concerns related to the viability of the proposed drainage route, additional sustainable drainage features, and impermeable area calculations. Following the submission of additional information, Warwickshire County Council Flood Risk Management removed their objection, subject to conditions being attached to any approval. These conditions are intended to ensure that the surface water management strategy is fully detailed and implemented appropriately. And again, all proposed conditions have been assessed against the paragraphs in the NPPF, which requires that conditions are necessary, relevant, enforceable, precise, and reasonable. And it has been determined that the proposed conditions meet these tests and will be added to the decision notice should the application be approved tonight. Next, we move on to ecology, biodiversity, and open space. Proposal has been assessed against the National Policy Framework and Borough Plan Policies NE1, NE2, and NE3, which seek to protect and enhance biodiversity and ecological networks. The indicative layout retains area of open space, primarily along the northern part of the site. Due to the presence of watercourses, roads, housing, and such features, the scheme cannot reasonably accommodate on-site equipped play provision, and as a result, MBBC Parks and Open Spaces have requested contributions towards improvements to local destination, community, local parks and allotments, which the application has agreed or will agree, which will be subject to the legal agreement. Policy NE1 also encourages green corridors along watercourses. The initial layout demonstrates that this can be done, helping to support blue and green infrastructure on the site. I'll now move to the next slide covering biodiversity and ecological mitigation. A range of ecology assessments have been submitted and reviewed by Warwickshire County Council Ecology. The statutory biodiversity metric indicates that development can achieve a 10% biodiversity net gain on site, which will be secured through a legal agreement and supported by the relevant conditions. In terms of species, swallow nests are currently located on site, and within the condition will be compensated through the provision of a swallow house. A tree with moderate bat roosting potential will be retained and protected during construction, and precautionary measures will be implemented for great crested newts. Further ecological enhancements will also be provided, including bat and bird boxes, hedge-up gaps within fencing, and a sensitive lighting scheme designed to minimise impacts on wildlife. These are all in the relevant conditions. The Council's refuse and waste team were consulted but have not responded, and it is therefore assumed they have no objection to the proposal. Given the nature of the area and the existing access, it is considered that refuse collection vehicles can adequately service the site, and details of bin service within the site, storage within the site, will be provided at the relevant reserve matters stage. Regarding fire safety, Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service were consulted and have raised no objection to the proposal, subject to a condition being added to decision notice should it be approved tonight. Next, in terms of heritage and archaeology, the site is not within or adjacent to any designated heritage assets such as listed building, conservation areas, scheduled monuments or historic landscapes. However, the County Council's archaeology team were consulted on the application. Their response may centre around the site's proximity to Newlands Hall Park, a post-medieval parkland, and nearby Newlands Hall Monastic Grange, which has fish ponds where Roman coins have been recovered. While there is limited direct evidence of pre-medieval activity on the site, this may reflect a lack of prior investigation rather than absence of archaeological deposits. So saying that, WCC Archaeology raised no objection to the proposal and subject to a condition to secure appropriate investigation and recording should approval be granted. But the 10th point is about affordable housing. Policy H2 of the Borough Plan requires 25% affordable housing on sites of 15 dwellings or more. This scheme proposes 100% affordable housing, which significantly exceeds the local policy requirement. Policy compliance at 25% will be secured through the legal agreement, with the remaining provisions secured through a legal agreement between the council and the developer. The Borough Plan Review does not contain a specific policy for affordable housing on greenbelt sites. The national policy applies, as I went over earlier. The policy proposal delivers 100% affordable housing, which is well above the national requirement. Both NBBC Housing and Pollen Policy support the application, and as the scheme is in outline, the final mix and distribution of affordable housing will be secured at the reserve matter stage in accordance with policy and the Affordable Housing SPD. The next we move on to air quality and land contamination and stability. No response was given from NBBC Environmental Health for this application, and they considered they have no objection to the scheme in terms of air quality and land contamination and stability. Even so, for air quality, 3 conditions have been added to the decision notice to allow the development to be in line with local policy. As for land contamination, no conditions have been added, and the site is not within the Coal Authority's high-risk development zone. Shown on screen are the requested planning obligations for this screen. I'll leave it up for 5 seconds for you to see that. Finally, all assessment issues listed on the previous slides have been considered and assessed in the agenda report. The main conflict and assessment arises around the designation of the site as grey belt or green belt and the impacts of this then on the assessment. It is worth noting that the scheme under a general housing scheme would not likely be approved, as 100% affordable element of the scheme justifies any departure from any policy. So therefore, the recommendation is as follows. Planning Committee is recommended to grant planning permission, subject to no new material planning considerations being raised during the consultation period, and to give delegated authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to secure the scheme through an appropriate legal mechanism, which may include conditions, a legal agreement, or a combination of all that is listed, and to issue a decision subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Just before I move on, I did forget to say one thing, is that this meeting is being recorded tonight and it will be put out on social media at a later date. Right, we'll move to our speakers then. The first speaker I've got on my list is Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Have I got a second before you start the clock? Oh, you've started, right. I'll speak quick. I have major concerns with this proposed development regarding road safety issues. The proposed entrance exit is a mere 351 feet, remember that, from a blind bend in the road. New road in this section is rural and bordered by fields, and although the speed limit is 30 miles an hour, many vehicles are driven at much higher speeds because of the rural nature. Traffic report only states one collision here, but no time period is given, and I've personally been involved in an accident on this very bend when my wife was driving and a car travelling at excessive speed came round the corner and ran in the back of us, writing off both vehicles. The traffic report data over only 6 days of monitoring proved that there were numbers of vehicles travelling at 50 to 50 miles an hour here. Official government stopping distances at 50 miles an hour are 175 feet in dry conditions and 350 feet in wet conditions. And at 60 miles an hour, 240 feet in dry and 480 feet in wet conditions. For vehicles travelling at these speeds, there is no way of stopping in time when coming around the corner in wet conditions. Frankly, I'm shocked that this has been allowed to get to committee stage with this major flaw. In addition, there's a serious problem with road drainage in this section. The gully pots are frequently blocked. In fact, they are at the moment. I reported this to WCC a month ago and it still hasn't been addressed. This section of road is flooded many times a year, which means even if conditions are otherwise dry, there is frequently standing water on the road following periods of rain. To have vehicles turning across the road here is an accident waiting to happen, and if it happens to be a cyclist or a mobility scooter, then a potential fatality. I've requested an FOI from Warwickshire Police on speed camera van data and RTAs on this road, but despite requesting this in good time, I've yet to receive it. This report minimises the concerns WCC Highways had regarding road safety, and I understand that there's been a lot of back and forth regarding this issue. I also completely refute the designation of this area of grey belt. From the NPPF, grey belt is defined as land in the green belt comprising previously developed land, which you've already discounted. There was only a stable on there, so that doesn't constitute development, and or other land that in either case does not strongly contribute to A, to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. To say Kersley End and Ash Green are villages and therefore exempt is nonsense. Kersley End is no longer a village. It's continuous with Coventry, with hundreds of houses having been built on the Coventry side and a final number of 3,000 new homes going to be built there. Ash Green is continuous with Bedworth, with new houses on Royal Oak Lane, and new developments passed on Bowling Green Lane. Therefore, Kersley End is part of Coventry built-up area and Ash Green is part of Bedworth built-up area. The other thing is to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, so this area helps prevent Coventry merging into Bedworth.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins.
Have I got 1 minute,
No,
Chair?
The egg time has
You've
gone
got
off.
2 items on the agenda tonight.
Talk to the Constitution.
Thank you.
Are there any points of clarification? No, thank you. Councillor W. Malcolm.
Yeah, can you clarify what you were going to say at the end?
No, because he hasn't said it. It was a good try, though. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I echo what Councillor Jenkins here has said. Absolutely. I have respect for the developer who normally builds really good quality development, but in this case, the issue of the visibility displays is really important. I would draw your attention to paragraph 5 of the report, and in particular, the panel that says that the visibility displays provided are acceptable based on speed survey data. We've just heard what that's like, right? And then it goes on to say that they're acceptable, though no data has been provided for forward vehicles turning right onto this road. That's the most dangerous part, somebody turning right out of there. It doesn't mention there's a bus stop opposite, within 50 metres of this as well. So if somebody's travelling towards Kersley, passes a parked bus at this point, they could be passing the bus at a time when somebody's turning left out of the development. As regards the grey belt issue, I think we should actually seek a ruling from legal on this, quite frankly, because we've got a situation where the Office of National Statistics regards Ash Green as part of Bedworth and regards Kersley as part of Coventry. We've got Prologis being developed on the other side of the road, which has extended Kersley by about 400 metres towards Ash Green. And now we want to extend Ash Green towards Kersley in the other direction. So we are narrowing the green belt between two places. I accept the officer views them as a village, but the ONS begs to differ. I'll just take up what Councillor Jenkins was intending to say. I mean, we want to prevent these neighbourhoods from merging into one another. That's part of the definition of what Greenbelt is for. We want to preserve the setting and character of these two villages, which are different. The very name of this area is Ash Green. It's meant to be green and surrounded by greenery. So let's try and do that, please. I know there's been no site visit for this, and I would respectfully ask for a deferment for a site visit so members can go see for themselves the visibility displays, what it looks like when there's a car parked or a bus parked in the lay-by which is adjacent to it. Because I've been round there. I had a friend who was nearly killed on a bike being hit by a car on that bend. Traffic does travel very quickly around there. And I absolutely echo what Councillor Jenkins was saying about the road flooding. I report it every year, several times. Residents in Elway Circle contact me because their houses have been hit by spray from traffic motoring through the puddles there.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Perfect timing. Are there any points of clarification? Councillor Chekovich.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's one to legal. Can I ask it now to legal, or do I have to direct it purely to Councillor Brown and what he said? Yeah, it's something that he said, but I think it maybe needs a legal adjudication.
Well, if it's for clarification, do it to Councillor Brown, and then if legal...
Okay, I'll have to do it later because it's really more for legal, Chair. Is that okay? I'll do it.
Are you doing it now or later?
Well, if you'll let me do it now, I'll do it now.
Not to the...
Yeah, but it is more for legal.
When we get into the debate,
thank you.
Please, yeah. Are there any other points of clarification? No, button drives me mad. In which case, we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Janet Watts.
Hi. Our issues on Elway Circle and why we are opposing the build mostly concern health and safety and a risk to life. This build will cause maximum impact to residents of Elway Circle due to the closeness of where the proposed road will be. This will be less than 6 metres away from 9 park homes that run just over the other side of the fence. We then have to consider that our park homes are made of timber and not bricks and mortar. The vibration that this will cause once the build starts will almost certainly damage our foundations, which will become dangerous for us to live in. And some of our residents are over 90, and this will cause a major upset or even worse. We then have the problem of wide loads and low loader vehicles delivering earth moves and heavy plant. Even when a Bellmouth junction will be built, it doesn't change the width of New Road. There isn't enough space for these types of lorries without causing major disruption to other road users and pedestrians, and the noise for not just Elway Circle residents, but for the Haven Rest Home as well. As for the 9 properties that run along to the proposed build, all of them apart from one have their bedrooms backing onto the fence, which will inevitably cause upset to sleep and relaxation, and due to noise and dust will stop them from opening their windows. We're almost sure that the noise barriers have not been considered for Elway Circle at all. It's okay to carry surveys out on speeding drivers and measurements and what will go where, But what about the human costing consideration? I'm almost sure that the builder could find a field somewhere else that it won't have so much impact, not just on the environment, but also on humanity. This also includes the diverse variety of wildlife that gives our older residents so much pleasure. This will be completely destroyed. On reading the initial application to this project, I noticed that it states that Nuneaton Town Centre is within walking distance of the proposed site. This is objectively untrue. It would take over 2 hours to walk it, and it also states that the doctor's surgeries are within walking distance. There is one surgery 1.4 miles away, and the other one is 1.3 miles away. So I'm pretty sure that a wheelchair user or elderly person living on the affordable housing estate would beg to differ. As councils are legally required to take into account a wide range of potential problems when approving new builds, this includes neighbouring properties and the impact that the construction will affect them. Have there been any risk assessments carried out on our site of the potential damage that the build will almost certainly cause? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any points of clarification? Councillor Chekovich.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just ask you a question? You spoke about the distance from the build to the town centre and to the local GPs. Could you just clarify whether that's a straight line distance from point A to point B, or whether that's like the distances you were driving it up and down the roads, including all the different bends and turns? Thank you.
Yeah, it's Benson. It's from Google. I've actually done them from Google. I've done my homework regarding Google, and I know that they're right because I use them all the time. So it's the Google. It's not as the crow flies.
Are there any other points of clarification? No? In which case, it's Rosemary Hamilton.
Thank you. As you've already said, there is about the wildlife. There is a diverse variety of wildlife in the field, such as foxes, badgers, pheasants, buzzards and bats, to name but a few. But this proposal will wipe out their habitat. As Janet had already said about the doctor's surgery and the town centre, I can only conclude with saying we, the residents of Alwee Circle, feel that there has been no consideration regarding any consultations apart from 2 letters that we've had. Also, the owner of the land has dropped equipment onto his land, but unfortunately the piping that they'd just dropped off was propped up against one of our residents' fencing, piling it as high as the fence, leaving an eyesore for the resident when she looks out of a window, which she found very upsetting. If the builder shows a lack of consideration at this stage, what have we got to come if accepted this proposal? As councils are legally required and expected to take into account a wide range of potential problems when approving new builds, this includes neighbouring properties and the impact that the buildings will affect them regarding dust, noise, etc. Have there been any risk assessments carried out on our site? We're not trying to stand in the way of progress and understand the urgent need for more housing throughout the country, but the cost of building a mere 22 residents, which would impact the mental and physical well-being as well as the financial stability of the residents of Alwee Circle, many of whom are simply trying to enjoy their golden years, living in the peace and beauty of the countryside, and not have to, number 1, endure a noisy building site, and number 2, potentially have their vista marred by houses and a strong possibility of noisy neighbours that we are just not used to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any points of clarification? No? Okay. That brings us on to Ellie Jones. Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm the planning agent that's acting on behalf of the developer for the application. I think obviously we've had a really comprehensive presentation from the case officer. There's a detailed officer report. I've only got 3 minutes. I can't go into detail on all of those things, but I think we need to pick out the salient and key points here. And that's that this scheme is for a 100% affordable rented housing development. There are no objections from any of the statutory consultees, including the Borough Council's planning officers, policy officers, housing officers, the county councils, archaeology and ecology officers, the relevant highway authority and the local lead flood authority. There are no outstanding objections or technical reasons to refuse the development, and members are aware that officers are offering their full recommendation to support the application that planning permission should be granted. The scheme is 100% affordable rented housing in what is considered to be a highly sustainable location. Members will be aware that despite the recent adoption of the Borough Plan Review, there remains a significant and chronic demand for affordable housing in the borough, and this is reflected in the number of individuals on the housing register that has continued to rise in consecutive years. Data provided by the Borough Council's housing officer to the developer identified that in May just last year there were 4,297 households on the housing register waiting for affordable housing. It's acknowledged it is outside the settlement boundary, but as we've already assessed in detail, policy H2 of the Borough Plan makes an exception for affordable housing rural exception sites where the homes can be delivered to meet the needs of local people in the community. So in this regard, it's in a sustainable location. Ash Green is considered to be a settlement that is sustainable with a range of day-to-day service provision and facilities, including a post office and convenience store, public houses, access to education, and within 150 metres of the site, there is a bus stop which offers frequent services to Nuneaton, Bedworth, Coventry, and the University Hospital, as well as stopping at other nearby local centres at Smarrell Lane and at Coventry Road and School Lane. The initial and subsequent occupancy for the affordable homes is going to be controlled through planning conditions and legal agreements as appropriate to ensure that the dwellings remain available in perpetuity to local people for an affordable housing need. It's a rare opportunity to deliver 100% affordable housing on a development in the face of what is a continuous and ongoing significant unmet demand. And this is an overriding planning consideration to give weight to the scheme. The site is in Greenbelt, but as set out by the officer, it's not considered to be a reason for refusal. The site is assessed as Greybelt. It's not inappropriate development in the Greybelt, and as assessed in the detailed landscape and visual impact assessment.
Okay, thank you. Are there any points of clarification? No? Okay, that's finished our list of speakers. Does anybody want to move the recommendation that we've got printed? Councillor Hickling. Anybody want to second that? Well, to enable debate to take place, I'll second it. Thank you. Right, at the moment, Phil, is there anything you wanted to come back on at the moment or wait for? Okay, thank you. Councillor Chekovich, you indicated earlier. But,
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had a question for legal, and it was regarding this issue about to prevent neighbouring towns merging, and obviously that the area doesn't get classified as a town. So I'm asking for sort of like a legal judgment. Is that in the spirit of what that clause is actually saying, or is that something that's hard and fast in the wording which can't be sort of more loosely interpreted?
Sorry, Chair, through you. Thank you for the query. The guidance is actually based on policy is based on guidance, which doesn't really have statutory effect. And what we mustn't do is read the National Planning Policy Framework as if it has statutory effect, in the sense that it's not a statute. Okay, so if we can just kind of focus on the wording, which I think Councillor Damon Brown picked up on, Greybelt is actually defined in policy. Okay. And it states basically that, unhelpfully, it states land in the Greenbelt comprising previously developed land, and the unhelpful bit is and or any other land that in either case does not strongly contribute to any purpose, any of the purposes A, B or D in paragraph 143 of the NPPF. Now, paragraph A, B and D are to check the unrestricted sprawl of built-up areas. The item B is to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, and the third point to consider is the preservation of the setting of any special characteristics. Now, the particular item in question, to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, I think is quite clear. We just should be focusing on towns rather than anything else, because in policy you can have reference to hamlets, to villages, etc. So this really is built-up areas. That's my initial kind of view on that.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask that question. That was, I think I understood it.
Yeah, I'll let you carry on because I think it's important.
Yeah. So I then wanted, you said about, was it special characteristics?
Sorry,
so,
there are three aspects.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. There are three aspects, okay, to consider. Firstly, if it's to constitute grey belt, it has to be previously developed land, okay? That is land that's has a pre-existing use being developed on, so that bit should be clear. And it also has three set criteria which also should be kind of considered to constitute green belt. And the first is it's to check the unrestricted sprawl of larger built-up areas. The second is, which is I think your point and Councillor David Brown's, to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another. Okay, so if to constitute grey belt, it should not be facilitating, okay, neighbouring towns merging. Does that make sense? Just to turn it on its head.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the neighbouring towns merging, but here what you've got is a city, Coventry. You've got Bedford, and then you've got the area of development itself, which is part of the village, and that's the bit that I'm not clear. I mean, is it a buffer between Bedworth and Coventry? Should it be considered in this instance, because it is quite a large development? I mean, it's a well-developed village. We use the term village. I live in Bulkington, which is population over 6,000. Yes, in terms of its name, it says village, but in all other intents and purposes, we are a very small town. So I can understand exactly what Councillor Brown's saying, and I'm trying to sort of see within what you're saying what the wiggle room is, if any at all, and on the interpretation of the wording, because I studied law many years ago. I decided not to go down that path, but sometimes, as we know, there's ambiguities in the wording, and I think we need to drill into that to just see how well that could be upheld if we were to sort of vote against it, or in favour of it. Obviously, is that 100% ironclad? And that's what I'm really trying to drill into at the moment.
Sorry, Chair, through you. I can answer that quite easily. It's not 100% ironclad. Okay, towns, I think, are defined statutorily. Villages are not. Okay, that's my understanding. And in policy, you can have reference to towns and villages separately. So there may be a policy definition, and separately for towns, for example, there could be a statutory definition. I guess under the Town Police Clauses Act, but I just need to double check that. But there is a distinction between towns and villages. So I think it's more than a judgment call to say one is, a town and the other is a village.
What I'd like to do is bring the planning officer into this, because the point that you've made about the land, and the land is, but the officer will tell me if I'm wrong, but the land, as I understand it, is not going towards the Coventry boundary. And if anything, it's going towards the Kersley village boundary. But I'll let.
Yeah. So obviously, grey belt is a very complex assessment to go through. So for the borough plan review, we do have set settlement boundaries. There is one for Nuneaton, there is one for Bedworth. The Ash Green one does not link. There is a gap in the official settlement of boundary between Ash Green and Bedworth. Therefore, it is considered not part of Bedworth and more part of the Northern Coventry Fringe, and becomes. It's not defined as it's not defined as a town, and neither is the Kersley part of the borough, and therefore you're not. It's not. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the way to word it to make you understand. This is about setting the unfit rule of, let's say, Bedworth to Coventry. You've done all Bedworth to Birmingham, Coventry to Birmingham, and this isn't. And this is more the Kersley to Ash Green area, and obviously these can't be considered as the urban areas for the assessment. They are classed as smaller than towns, and therefore you're not checking the unrestricted sprawl, and you're not contributing to the merging of towns. So am I making sense to anybody? I feel like I'm just rambling.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. Councillor Hickling. I'll bring you back in later on. Councillor Hickling.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to process what you've just said about the merging and stuff. On a few other issues, I was a bit alarmed by Councillor Jenkins and the issue with the road safety, with quite close to this end and traffic way over the. And for what I can see, there's not a great deal of traffic mitigation apart from painting some 30 things on the road. I was wondering whether we can have, if we do go through this, whether there can be some recommendation that more is spent on traffic speed mitigation, whether it's flashy lights or something, so we can really try and get that traffic down to 30 or whatever. And the other issue, again, to do with this grey belt and this development of what classes as grey belt, I'm a bit confused about the fact a stable which has a few horses. I'm not sure how big this stable is, by the way. I don't. If it's got 100 horses, it's got 3 horses. But I don't see the difference between a stable with 3 horses or 5 horses in it. You know, they eat grass, they poo, and they're quite tall, compared to a barn with 10 cows, which also eat grass, poo, and got 4 legs. I don't quite see what the difference is. I'm guessing it's some legal thing, and I'm guessing you're going to say there's a list of things. This is something else. So that's one thing that confuses me. The traffic thing issues. I am quite sympathetic to the idea of possible of a deferment, but only have a site visit. But I'm not sure that will really clarify the issue of the grey belt stuff. It might just clarify the road issue. And just prove to us that the road isn't very good, and it might give Warwickshire County Council possibly a few extra weeks to actually do some traffic survey or something. Guessing it won't do. So for me, just some clarification on this stable versus a question, whatever it is. How, you know, is there a size thing in that? I mean, does the MPPF thing say if a stable's more than a certain size, then it's not ever? Whether we can try and get the county council to have more speed mitigation. So if it does go ahead, at least it's, I like the idea of having, you know, all these houses being affordable, but I think we need to make sure it's safe as well. So whether we can try and get some more mitigation on the traffic speed, at the very least, I'll be pushing. So yeah, that's where I am on this anyway.
Phil, anything to come back on that?
So with the highways, I'll start with highway stuff because that's the easiest to do. So as mentioned in the report, I mentioned in the section, there have been extensive discussions with highways. They have done a stage 1 road safety audit, and there are advanced warnings, and there are road improvements to be done on new road. The speed limit is 30. I mean, you can't, the highways are not going to legislate for like somebody breaking a highway law. It has been approved by the highway officer, who are the expert on highway safety, and they are happy with, subject to the conditions and the section set at 278 and anything with reserve matters. They are happy with the access, they're happy with the road, they're happy with the improvements that have been suggested in the road safety audit. So we can't put an objection against that because the highway officer, through extensive discussions and extensive consultations, has approved the scheme. As for the grey belt, as legal officer explained, there are 2 parts to a grey belt assessment. One is the definition in the MPPF, and then the other part is the 3 purposes. It did have a stables at the back. I don't think that we concluded that it was all previously developed land, and it is partly developed land because the stables were at the back. Equestrian use is not excluded from a grey belt definition, and then once you get past that, a yes or no, then the next stage, that having a yes or no to that still doesn't stop it being grey belt. That's just the first stage of the assessment. The second stage of the assessment comes under the purposes that you've talked about with the unrestricted sprawl, merging of towns, and historic setting. And if all of them have weak contribution, which we have assessed that it does, then it becomes grey belt land. Does that help explain?
Okay, thanks, Phil. I'll take it from there. Yeah, and it is worth saying that it's pretty much an open invitation to the highways officers from the county council to attend these planning applications committee. It's sometimes a little bit difficult for our officers to be kind of defending the county council highways officers. Is there any other member wish to speak at this point? Councillor Condacor.
Yeah, it's going back again to the road safety aspects. Are there pavements on both sides of New Road going all the way to Kersley End? So in effect, people can only walk in one direction. Because I'm thinking in terms of affordable housing, you know, statistically they are less likely to actually have cars. So we're looking at things. There's nothing mentioned about cycle safety. And the other thing that's not been mentioned at all is they talk about the bell mouth for the road into the field. Directly opposite that, there seems to be another entrance for the nursing home. So and it says quite clearly in the report, though no forward visibility for right turning vehicles has been shown. So that, in my mind, is just a no-no, because, I mean, it's a accident waiting to happen, isn't it? You've got two lots of traffic potentially turning, no visibility for the turn, no options for walking, on pavement and things. So, I've got big concerns there.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other member not all? I've got you down, Councillor. I'm just trying to bring in anybody that hasn't spoken. Councillor S. Markham.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points, actually. The first one, it's actually already been gone through, but it's regarding the highways. And I know New Road is a 30 mile an hour because I use it myself. But it's obviously been said tonight that the data shows that people are doing more than 50. And if there hasn't been an assessment or any data assessment for the turning right issue, because we all know that turning right is one of the most dangerous manoeuvres that we do, well, surely that should have been undertaken. And if it hasn't been, why hasn't it? And I don't really agree with some of the points of the presentation. The first one is the development will alter, in my opinion, the visual amenity landscape. And regarding the impact on the green belt, item A, I think you're right that it won't merge with Kersley, but this development will actually merge with the houses that are already there, and it will reduce the distance and help to merge Bedworth Town, because Bedworth Town spreads out that far. And from there, everywhere that you go into Bedworth, there is housing either side of the road, apart from Bowling Green Lane, where there's a school and a new development going in, but then it links back to the houses again. So from there, whichever direction you go into Bedworth, there are houses, and that will link to the houses that are already up. So I don't see how it doesn't link to Bedworth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Phil, any comments on them? No? Oh, sorry.
It is just a statement that obviously, as mentioned, the highways officers have signed off there with the conditions and the RSA and the advanced warning systems that are going to be put on New Road with slow signs and paint on the road. And they have assessed that the access to the site will not cause an issue to highway safety. And I appreciate that there's no highway officer here, but we have to take their, and I've probably heard this a lot with loads of other applications, we have to take their word that once they've got no objection and subject it to the contributions for the planning request contributions and the conditions that they've requested, they have regarded the access that has been proposed as safe and appropriate and acceptable for the site. As the grey belt stuff, again, it is a judgment call, and I've been through where the thoughts of when I was doing the assessment were when assessing against these points, and that again I think would be an opinion of.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. The bit I'm struggling with on this is this termination of grey belt from greenbelt. It's clearly stated in your report that it is determined as existing greenbelt. Then it goes on to say that greenbelt can become grey belt where it's had some type of development on. Now, as far as I can see, it's had stables on, which are not a permanent structure by any means. They're usually a timber-built thing, which is classed as a shed, basically, which is not a permanent development. There's no hard standing area on there that's covering any of the ground. Surely this is a little green lung in this area that's about to be obliterated by connectivity to Ash Green and its surrounding area, and that's going to deprive that area of this little green lung as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's a fine line to say that it's now become grey area because of a wooden or whatever this structure is on there. You know, we can go around the whole of the borough and look at green belts surrounding us, and there's a stable on there, then suddenly does that become grey area, you know? And I find this a dangerous sort of assessment of what is valued green area, and that's the point I'd like to make, really.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the one thing that is clear is it's not clear. Yeah, I accept that. Sorry, Prickpal, did you want to...
Chair, through you, yeah, I just wanted to clarify something which I said I would look at, and that was the definition of a town, if it would help. And just to go back to the last councillor that spoke, there is actually a two-stage process you need to go to establish grey belt. So it's not just the fact that it has to be previously developed land. There's the 3 tests which I mentioned, which are set out in the report, which the officers kind of set out, I think, quite comprehensively. But just go back to the point which I think the councillor raised regarding towns and villages. There is no clear distinction. There is no per se statutory definition of a town, but the closest I can get is Local Government Act 72, which allows parish councils to actually designate their parishes as towns, and that's the closest there is. But with villages, I think it's more defined in policy or settlement boundaries, as the officers suggested. So this clearly just relates to towns merging rather than anything else.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other member wish to speak that hasn't already done so? I want to try and move on if I can. So I'm going to take Councillor Shekovich as the last speaker.
Thank you, Chair.
Unless I have anything to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of delve in, Chair, to something that Philip said towards the end of his presentation. I don't know if anyone else picked it up, but you were talking about in your summation about this being 22 affordable houses, which is something the borough certainly does need. But you then sort of said that normally we would not consider this as being acceptable, or words to that effect. I'm not quoting you directly. Could you clarify why this is okay, but if it wasn't 22 affordable houses, it wouldn't meet the tests, and why we would then reject it?
So, as mentioned in my principle of development section, under the board plan review, we have a 5-year housing land supply, and so housing development that's not in strategic sites or is required can be refused on material consideration. Policy H2, which is what I went through with the criteria, allows for rural. Let me see if I can go back to that so I can read the bullet points straight off the slide. So it's this bit in the green. So this is the exceptions bit of policy H2, which is the affordable housing policy in the board plan review, which is the very first sentence. Outside of settlement boundaries, housing development, in addition to those calculated from the board plan review, will be supported on small rural exception sites where affordable homes, which obviously this is 100% affordable, can be delivered to meet the needs of local people within a local community where there is no conflict with other board plan review policies and where the following criteria are met. So there is no conflict with the other board plan review policies, and it is 100% affordable, and it is to meet the needs of local people. So that first paragraph is set. The site is adjacent to an existing settlement boundary, which is obviously the ash green one that everyone's talking about. It's considered a suitable virtue of its size. It's not a very large site of hundreds of houses. 22 is deemed reasonable, and it's a sustainable site. And obviously, the affordable housing thing has been, as mentioned, is going to be secured to a legal agreement or condition, but most likely legal to be affordable throughout and in perpetuity. So it can't be done as market housing. And then obviously, when an element of market housing is required, then they have to justify why. But if this was 50% affordable housing, there's not a number where it becomes, say 75% affordable housing is right. There's not that number, but 100% affordables is acceptable in this site, where a normal scheme of where you only get 25% would not likely, I can't say for sure, but would not likely be set for approval with the same scheme. Does that answer the question as to why?
You've answered the first.
Well,
Sorry, Chair.
I'll let you make one last comment, then I'm moving on because we've been an hour nearly.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of check though. Really, you said otherwise it would have been rejected. I just want to know what the grounds for rejection. You told me why it should be accepted, but you haven't really answered the second part, which is why it would be rejected if it was 25%, 50%, 75%. So I want to know those grounds that you would have rejected it otherwise.
If it was a market housing scheme, there wouldn't be the principle of the development set in the board plan review policy with the fact it being outside a settlement boundary, a windfall site with a 5-year housing land supply. But this policy is the reason why that is not the case. So although it sounds like I'm telling you why this one can be approved, it does also prove why a 25% affordable housing site on that field, where it's 75% market housing and privately owned outside the settlement boundary, is not likely. I can't say for sure. One might come to a next committee, but it is not likely without full justification and loads of other factors are going their way.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Right, I'm going to try and move us along a bit, but I do have a couple of comments that I wanted to make myself. I think one thing that struck me as kind of unusual, really, was there was actually, I think it was 4 letters in supporting the application. It ain't very often we get letters supporting applications. They're usually mainly against. And looking at it, I think it is a fairly balanced application to take into account. But there's a couple of things that concern me. And I was thinking of the affordable housing part where they're saying it's going to be 100%. I'd want to be sure that would actually happen, that at some point in the future we don't get the applicant come back and say, oh, we can't afford it because the price of bricks has gone up again and we want to reduce it. So I want to know whether we can do that. The other thing, and certainly Claire will know my view, I'm always a little bit concerned about outline applications that have got an indicative plan with them as well. And again, I'd want to make sure that anything like that would come back to this committee, because it is close to the Alwey Circle part of it. So you wouldn't want anything that's too tall or maybe overlooking or whatever. So I think that's the case. The problem, I think one of the main problems we've got again is with the county council highways people, where we're not getting clear. Well, the advice is there, and I accept that our officers have to take their advice, but it's difficult when we can't have one sitting down on the corner like we used to some years ago and be able to answer the questions. But they're just comments. I've listened to what everybody's said about it. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to move to the vote, because it was moved and seconded to grant planning permission. I'm going to take that. So all those in favour of that? Looks like it's just me. And against? Nine. There's no abstentions. So that's not approved. So I need to have something else put forward. Councillor Chekovich.
Thanks, Chair. Just before we go to something else, I just
Yeah.
wondered if we could actually ask for a site visit, obviously, or has that time passed to ask for that? Because I think a lot of us...
We haven't got anything on the table at the moment.
Yeah, so
you could, if you want to move that.
I will move that motion, Chair, if there's a seconder.
Is that seconded? It's about everybody, really. We do need to have reasons for the site visit as well. Some of the things that I picked up on, and you can tell me. I mean, really, this should be coming from the proposer and the seconder, really. I'll do it that way, and then I'll add mine if you think there's anything to add. Councillor Chekovich.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So obviously the visibility displays on the highways, the turning right issue. I think those for me are the main things that I'd like to actually go and see for myself. I don't know if our seconder had any other, but they were the things that sort of caused me most concern.
Councillor Hickling.
Agreed, Chair. For me, it was looking at the road safety issues, and I was concerned earlier on.
Okay, so the highway issues.
Chair, would it be possible to ask for highways to attend as well?
Yes, we will. Yeah, if we vote for the site visit, then we will include that as a request to the county council to send an officer to attend. I think maybe some of the other things that I'd written down will maybe be picked up again by officers. I'd kind of Phil's already covered about the merging aspect of it and protecting the character. There was a concern about damage during construction. That should be dealt with under some conditions. Yeah. No. Okay. There was something that I'm sorry if I've missed it in the thing. I thought there was a reasonable request about if it was to happen about noise attenuation. So, but something between the sites. So that's just worth thinking about before the next meeting. Somebody, Councillor Condacourt.
Yeah, can we just add about sort of looking at the visual amenity and things, because I'm very conscious that this is a mobile home park, and by its nature they're only going to be sort of relatively small, low.
Yeah, visual amenity is important.
Yeah, relative to what's...
But bearing in mind we haven't got any details, it's an outline.
Yeah,
but it's a case of having to see the site and.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So have you got all those recorded, Claire? Yeah. Okay, is everybody clear on the reasons for the site visit? All those in favour of a site visit? That's unanimous, thank you. No. Right, okay, so it's been a little while, but nevertheless, we will be making a site visit before our next meeting. Those of you that you've been in touch with us already, you'll be contacted again by the officers to let you know the details of the site visit. Okay, thank you. You can be there, but there's certain restrictions we have to place on it in regards to talking to people on the side. You're more than welcome to be there. You're the ones that are, having the effect of it. Okay, thank you. Right, if we can move on then to We are just swapping over with the officers, and it's going to be Ben. Ben that takes us. Yeah, unless you're not. No. Okay, right, which brings us on to item number 2, which is Vicarage Street, Nuneaton, and Ben's going to be presenting this one. Thank you. Cheers, Ben.
Thank you. So, outline planning permission has been granted under reference 39175 for the erection of a new library and business centre and up to 65 dwellings. This includes site clearance and demolition of the existing library. All matters of detail with the permission were reserved for consideration in subsequent reserved matters and conditions applications. This will include details on access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. Since outline permission was granted, technical design has progressed for the development, particularly the library and business centre. It has become apparent minor revisions for the plans approved under condition 4 of 39175 will be required to support forthcoming and ongoing reserved matters submissions. A Section 73 application can be used to make material amendments by varying conditions associated with a permission. There is no limit on the degree of change to conditions, but the change must only relate to conditions and not the operative part of the permission, i.e. it must not result in development which is fundamentally different to that it must not be fundamentally different from what has already been approved. Such an application will ordinarily be determined under delegated authority. However, in this case, the application is reported to committee as it involves the council as landowner and the overall development is classed as a major development. There have been no objections from any technical consultees or any neighbours and third parties. The first key change sought relates to 2 additional parcels of land to be included within the application site boundary as shown. This includes 36 square metres to the northwest of the site off Bridge Street. This land is needed to ensure alignment with the latest topographical survey and to include land for public roundworks, which currently sit just outside the red line boundary. There is also 216 square metres of additional land to the north of the site. This is adjacent to the Wheat Street, Vicarage Street junction. This land was initially thought to be required for separate highways works. However, this land is now surplus to those works and will need to be incorporated into the existing permission to avoid a redundant parcel of land. The other key change relates to the required minimum gross internal floor area for the library and business centre. Detailed plans for the library and business centre have now been submitted through a separate reserved matters application, which is noted in the agenda. The reserved matters application will be referred to committee once that is ready for determination. It is apparent from the reserved matters submission that the currently proposed floor area is below the amount required. The current requirement is for an area minimum of 3,730 square metres. This is now sought to be reduced to 3,000 square metres. For context, the existing library is below 1,300 square metres. The current reserved matters plans propose 1,583 square metres for the library and 1,790 square metres for the business centre, for an overall 3,373 square metres gross internal floor area. The reason a 3,000 square metre threshold has been requested is in case amendments are required to the reserved matters submission, which would further reduce the floor area. Clearly, an overly small library and business centre in the Nuneaton town centre would be unsatisfactory. However, there's no evidence to suggest the currently conditioned minimum is inherently the minimum to provide a satisfactory development. It would appear the minimum currently imposed was simply thought a reasonable threshold to bring forward a satisfactory development at the time of determination. Given the amendment sought will still result in a library larger than the existing situation, this is considered to be satisfactory still. In short, quantums of floor space are often difficult to accurately gauge at outline stage, given detailed plans have not yet been produced. Based on a reasonable view, with some weight given to the ongoing reserved matters submission, 3,000 square metres does not appear to be too small to deliver a satisfactory library and business centre. There are no other changes to the building heights plan other than those already set out. There are no changes to the approved land use plan other than those changes already set out. This summary slide and the previous slides with plans can be referred back to upon request. Also of note is some conditions on the existing permission have since been approved, as noted in the planning history in the agenda. Where relevant, the wording of recommended conditions has been updated to reflect this, i.e. conditions will now be to the effect of development shall be undertaken in accordance with approved details, rather than prior to development, details shall be submitted and approved. A full assessment is provided in the agenda. Fundamentally, there are considered to be no notable new impacts in comparison to the assessment of the existing permission with regards to the following: principle of development, heritage and archaeology, highway safety, residential amenity, visual amenity, flood risk and drainage, ecology, biodiversity, open space, land contamination and air quality, affordable housing, planning obligations, public benefits, then the conclusion and planning balance. All these matters are considered to be adequately controlled by existing and updated conditions. While there may be a proportionate reduction in some public benefits associated with the library and business centre, given the decrease in floor space, this is not considered to meaningfully impact the overall public benefits and planning balance previously reached. In conclusion, the National Planning Policy Framework promotes a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and decisions should be made in line with an adopted development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. 39175 is an extant planning permission, the assessment of which already considered essentially all material planning considerations relevant to this application. This application clearly only proposes very minor changes to the existing permission, which are necessary to allow subsequent reserved matters applications to be brought forwards. It is considered the development will not result in undue conflict with the adopted development plan or policies within the National Planning Policy Framework overall. It is therefore considered the development would achieve sustainable development, which should be approved subject to conditions. The outcome of this planning application would not grant consent on any separate matters, including the forthcoming application for the library and business centre. Non-planning matters are not able to be taken into account in determining this application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Does anybody want to move the recommendation? Councillor Smith. Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded the recommendation to grant planning permission. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Condacor.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit concerned about the numbers we're talking about, because the original one we've got was 3,730 square metres, and they're now wanting us to give us a minimum 3,000 square metres. Now that's 20% smaller, which seems, it seems like the whole thing is shrinking and shrinking. I don't know. I mean, you've given us the figures of what the existing library is and what the new library is proposed to be, but that's in the figures. We're only talking about the total. And what if we said, yes, they can have the minimum being 3,000 square metres? Is there anything in the applications that have already been approved to say, but the library must be this, and the business centre, is the balance? Because I don't understand if the current reserve matters plans that are in is for 3,373 square metres, and yet they want us to approve a minimum of 3,000. It's as if I think they're going to shrink it even more.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
It's a good question. The short answer is, so you can't be adding new conditions on where they're only seeking to vary what's already been passed. I can't speak to why there wasn't a detailed breakdown on, the library needs to be this square metre, the business centre needs to be this. There's just an overall figure. On a personal level, if this was coming back again, I probably would want that, but that's kind of already been and gone. We're only looking at the overall figure. The reserve matters application will be coming hopefully next month. There's no indication that the figures in front of me will meaningfully change. But in terms of the control you could put on now, only the overall figure, not a detailed breakdown of the library and the business centre.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I think it is a fair question, actually, yeah. Right, any other member? Excuse me. Ashley Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. I share Councillor Connachall's comments. I think to suddenly reduce it by 20% with no reason as to why they want to reduce it down is a little surprising to me. I would hate to think that we're going to get a smaller library than we've miserably got already. And the same with the business centre. You know, they're saying about little business centres and units, so we're going to reduce all those units down, taking out over 20%. So I've got real concerns about what they're asking us to do, Chair.
Okay, anything else, Ben? You kind of covered it, I think.
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's still bigger than what's there before. So I think it'd really be a struggle to sustain, although I obviously appreciate your concerns in terms of an actual reason for refusal, that would be very hard to justify. But yeah, I take the point of it's smaller than what was originally envisaged. But yeah, I suppose the conclusion I come to, it's still bigger and in my view better than what is there now. So I would recommend approval.
Any other member? Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see that those two pieces of land that have been identified, they've been an eyesore for many years, those little pockets. In what form will they be incorporated into the plan?
Thank you. So, can you see my arrow? No. So the two purple blobs, so this has already been determined, so we're not revisiting that, but the two purple blobs are residential dwellings up to 65. The green blob is the library and business centre. So there's no changes to, I mean, I'll scroll through a couple of slides. So in terms of the land use, that's remaining as it's already got permission for. The only thing we're looking at is adding 2 small parcels of land to it and reducing the size of the library and business centre slightly. So yeah, sorry. If that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ben.
Sorry, I was referring to those two.
Okay, thank you. There's nobody else. The recommendation is as printed to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? And against? And there's no abstentions. Thank you. So that's approved. Sorry. That concludes our business. Can I thank everybody for their attendance, declare the meeting closed, and look forward to the site visit in warmer weather.